Okay, so today we are on 3.4 and we are working on factor by grouping. Factor by grouping. Okay. The first part of the problems are going to start out where they're already kind of like pre-factored for you. Okay, so you're going to see something like 4 times 3x plus 7 minus y times 3x plus 7. Okay, this is already pre-factored for you, and you did factor by grouping in Algebra 1, but a lot of people don't quite remember it because it's not something that we use very often. Okay, but factor by grouping is simply we're making 2 parentheses. Okay, you want to make 2 parentheses, so this is one of your parentheses. Factor by grouping is actually really, really similar to GCF. Okay, what do both of these terms, because really we have 2 terms here, what do both of the terms have in common is what's in the parentheses. So take out that kind of like a GCF, right? And then the other parentheses, you are writing what's left behind. And what's left behind would be 4 minus y. Okay, so you can think of this kind of a lot like GCF. Okay, but the GCF here is your parentheses. Say again? That's it. That's your answer. No, that's your answer.
It gets a little
That's
harder.
it.
Wait,
Okay? The 4's right there. Okay, let's try another one. If I give you 40d cubed plus 16d squared minus 15d minus 6. 40d cubed plus 16d squared minus 15d minus 6. What's the first thing I told you that you need to look for when we're factoring? GCF. Is there a GCF here? No. Almost. Okay? When you have 1, 2, 3, 4 terms, the first thing you have to look for is GCF. Okay? There is no GCF here. So what we're going to do is with 4 terms, you know it has to be grouping factoring. So what you need to do is first look for a GCF just between the first 2 terms. So between just the first 2 terms, between 40 and 16, what could come out of both of those? An 8 and d squared. Okay, then you write whatever's left behind. So if you divided that away, we would get 5d plus 2. Now this is key. Look at whatever sign is here. That is what sign has to be factored out. So when we look for your GCF here, what's the GCF between 15d and 6? A 3. Okay, remember, I have to factor out that exact same sign that's in the middle. So if I factor out a negative 3, what's left behind would be 5d. I factored out the negative, so it turns to positive and a 2. And look what happens. Your parentheses are exactly the same. So now we're going to basically do GCF again. Your GCF is what's in the parentheses, so 5d plus 2, multiplied by 8d squared minus 3. Now, notice, you do not write 5d plus 2 squared. There is not an exponent on that parentheses. Yes?
Just doing the opposite would be less nice. Like, this is what we started off
Okay,
with last night.
what we did yesterday was multiplying. What we're doing today is like dividing. It's factoring.
Right, but like,
So yes, we're doing exactly opposite. So factoring is like dividing, as opposed to what you did yesterday was multiplying. Okay, so we're shrinking into 2 parentheses. There is not 2 of the same thing here, okay? Because, listen, that's a good question. Why can you not put a square? Because if it was squared, it would be multiplied together. This is separated by a minus, so it's not multiplied. Not everything's multiplied together. If everything's being multiplied together, that's when you'd have the d squared, or the parentheses squared. This one's not being multiplied, so you can't do that. Okay, I want you to factor again. 3xy minus 21x plus 4y minus 28. 3xy minus 21x plus 4y minus 28. Okay, first thing you want to look for, again, is your GCF. Okay, so is there anything that can come out of all of the parts? And there's not. Okay, so you want to look for GCF between just the first two. GCF between just the first two is a 3 and an x. If you divide that away, you'd be left with y minus 7. Now, like I said, super important that you put this sign in between, even if it's a plus. Okay, because that's going to make up the second part of your parentheses. So plus, what factors out of the second portion is just a 4, so plus 4. And what's left behind? Y minus 7. So I have a pair of y minus 7, so those go in parentheses, y minus 7, multiplied by 3x plus 4. Yep, because you brought out a plus. They might. Okay, let's try another one. For number 4, I'd like you to factor 4y multiplied by x minus 2 plus 9 times 2 minus x. Make it just a little bit harder. Okay, this one is already kind of pre-factored for you, but what do you notice about the two parentheses? They're exactly opposite of each other, right? They're backwards. If I rewrote this with the x first, with the variable first, it would be rewritten as negative x plus 2, right? So how could I make these be exactly the same? Multiply by a negative or divide by a negative, okay? If I divide this by a negative, what would happen is this would come out, a negative would come out, so I would put a negative 9, and then you flip everything that's inside of here. So if I divided by a negative, you would get an x minus 2. So that's what you have to do. We want to make those two parentheses exactly the same. Okay, so if they're opposite of each other, if they're backwards of each other, then you have to divide away a negative. Now I can make my groups. So I have a group of x minus 2's and another group of 4y minus 9. So take what they have in common and then what's left behind. So x minus 2, multiplied by 4y minus 9. Okay, just a couple more. Let's try for number 5. I would like you to factor 5wh minus 15w plus 12 minus 4h. 5wh minus 15w plus 12 minus 4h. Is there a GCF for all of these? No GCF for all of them. So you're going to look at just the first two. Take out a GCF between just those first two. So look at numbers and variables. So between the coefficients, you could take out a 5. You can also take out a variable of w. Left behind, you'd have h minus 3. Then we want to take out this same sign, so plus. And what does both 12 and negative 4h have in common? A 4. Okay, so take out a 4. Left behind would be 3 minus h. What's wrong with this? They're backwards of one another. So to get them to flip around, you have to take out a negative. Okay, so that's going to become minus 4. And you flip this around and it'll become h minus 3. You always, by the way, always want to change the second parentheses. We never change the first one. Okay, you always change just the second one. So you still have 5w times h minus 3. So we want these to be exactly the same. If they're not exactly the same, you have to change them so they are. Okay, so one of your groups is h minus 3, and the other parentheses is what's left behind, 5w minus 4. Good. Okay, like 2 more. For number 6, okay, for number 6, I would like you to factor x squared times y squared plus 4 minus, in parentheses, 4 plus y squared. X squared times y squared plus 4 minus 4 plus y squared. did we notice about these two parentheses? Are they the same?
Yes.
Ooh. If I rewrote this, this would be still y squared plus 4, right? So do I have to divide by a negative? No, you just have to rearrange it, okay? If there's a plus in between, then they can just be flipped around. If there's a minus in between, that's when you have to subtract or divide out a negative 1. Okay, so this is exactly the same. So you're going to take out a y squared plus 4, and what's left behind? X squared minus what? A 1, exactly. There's always a 1 as that placeholder. It's not a 0, okay? So minus 1. Now, am I done? Remember, this says factor completely.
No, you're not done.
Now you can do difference of squares. Okay, so that's where it's going to become more difficult today, because sometimes after you factor, you can factor again. So here, y squared plus 4 does not factor. That is not difference of squares because it doesn't have a subtract in between. Then x plus 1, x minus 1. Okay, so you will have to double factor on some of the problems that you encounter today. You will have to double factor. Yes?
Why is there this negative in front of the fence?
Because that's the problem I gave you.
I know, but you didn't change the sign though. It's like
Right, because this is the same thing, right?
the negative 4.
No. Listen, you do not need to multiply or divide by a negative because there's no negatives in there. Look, see, this is the same thing. If I rewrite it, nothing's negative. Guys, nothing's negative.
But that's a negative 4.
What's a negative 4? In here, that's plus.
No, the one right there.
This is negative,
Yeah, negative 1 times negative 4 is.
but you're not multiplying through. I'm not asking you to distribute. I don't want you to distribute.
You can flip it because it's just like 5 plus 2 and 2 plus 5.
You don't distribute the negative.
Exactly. This one is, they're both positive no matter how you write it. Exactly. It's just like 5 plus 2 or 2 plus 5. They're both positive, so it doesn't matter. Okay? And your last one, I'm going to give you one that is more like a challenge. Yay. Okay? More like a challenge problem. Again, factor completely. 4x cubed minus 8x squared minus 25x plus 50. 4x cubed minus 8x squared minus 25x plus 50. First, look for GCF. Is there GCF here? No. So look at the first two. What is the GCF of just the first two? 4x squared. If you divide that away, you'll be left with x minus 2. Factor out this sign, so take out a negative. And what's the GCF between the second part? 25. Again, what's left behind? X minus 2. It's minus 2 because we factored out a negative. Then rewrite these. This is one of your parentheses, so x minus 2. Your second parentheses, 4x squared minus 25. And is this completely factored? No. Nope, not quite. This is x minus 2. And again, this is difference of squares. When you're doing grouping and you have to factor a second time, it is almost always going to be a difference of squares that you're going to have to factor again. So 4x squared breaks down to 2x and 2x. 25 breaks into 5 and 5. That's that.